Hi, Young. How are you? Hi, Michon. How are you?
Hi, doing well. How are you?
Very well. It's nice to see you both. I'm glad you've got your artwork behind you. That's awesome. Super. Well, thanks for joining us. This is exciting. As you know, this is our third year of the prize. And because obviously we're doing everything differently with COVID, we're doing this as a virtual for the first time. But thank you for your time and making this work. Well, Young, maybe we'll start with you. I have to say, I love the topic. I love the title, and it's so perfect for what we're all here to talk about and try to promote, the Artist Studio. And I was thinking maybe if you could just tell us a little bit of the story behind it, what inspired you. And I always love to know what you had in mind when you started, whether you had a vision of what it would look like or it evolved into something you didn't even quite imagine, but just the background, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, okay, I can talk about that. The Art Studio, the piece that I submitted for the AXA Prize, is about like anxiety or agony or like pressure that I experienced, and as a like intrinsic part of like being an artist. So the multiple characters in the painting represent like myself in my more vulnerable moments. Because last year I was like going through a difficult time as a young artist. I think I was like figuring out my identity as a painter, and and I wanted to express what I was experiencing at that moment in the most authentic way. But also I wanted to like present it like visually a bit whimsical and fun and playful with the characters from my imagination to make the contrasting effect. And that time I was getting a lot of like inspirations from the German expressionists at that time. So like Odo Dix or like Max Beckmann. So I tried to be more expressive with my brush strokes and mark makings.
Excellent. And was it what you imagined it would be from the beginning, or was it more of an evolution that developed over time in terms of your vision?
Actually, the piece was like my kind of like turning point kind of piece, because I started using just only imagination from this piece. Before this, I was using like a photo reference, sometimes and sometimes not, but usually I have like take time to make like a good photo reference. But from this piece, I just tried to just use my imagination, and yeah.
Well, it's successful, so bravo. It's really great. Thank you. And Michon, if you don't mind, maybe a bit of the same. We talked a little bit about your work once before, and I'm so thrilled to see the recognition you're now receiving, because I really do love the piece. And just a little bit, again, if you don't mind, your vision and maybe similarly, if it ended up the way you expected it to or not. It's just an interest of mine when I think about the creative process.
Yeah, my piece definitely did not end up the way that I had intended it to be, and for all of the good reasons. I mean, the story sort of behind it is, you know, my process is to go through old family photos and, you know, sort of reference figures from different, you know, different images. And when I came to this particular event, there was a funeral, and I was like, I really want to capture these moments, not the spectacle itself, not what's to follow the spectacle, but there's this sort of quietness in between the happenings. And that was really my motivation, you know, for making this painting, was to capture the relationships between the figures, the relationships between the figures in the event that maybe had just happened or that's gonna happen. You know, the title of the piece is Repass to Follow. So it implies that there's something that's going to happen after this, you know. But yeah, it started out with a lot more detail. You know, there wasn't a stark yellow background. And as I kept working on it, it felt right. I went with what felt organic. I looked at that yellow on my palette, and I realized like, oh yeah, that's the yellow that has to be here. This screams hope, it screams sunshine. It's such a contrast to the actual event that, you know, it preceded it. And from a color theory perspective, you know, yellow and brown look beautiful together. So
Agreed.
Yeah.
And the contrast to the yellow and the sort of midnight blues is beautiful. Both of you actually have quite strong color in your compositions, and that's fun to see. And it's great again to see your work behind you in your studios, because again, colors jumping out off of the screen. It's very clearly an important feature for both of you, but it's also super enjoyable for the viewer, I can assure you. So great, thank you for that. And then the next question, maybe Michon first, if you don't mind, sort of it's about reflection of your personal experience. You've talked about this event and the in-between space, but I just wondered, that gives us an idea of what you were trying to share, but how do you relate the image of your piece to your own personal experiences?
For me, it's, you know, that image is so familiar. Not that specific image, but that, you know, that time period, those moments in between. And those are the moments, you know, like I said, I grew up in the South. And so gatherings are always fantastic. And the big, like I said, the spectacle is always awesome. But the best parts of it to me are those moments where we're all kind of sort of getting our bearings and figuring out what our next steps are. And those are the kind of things that I like to hold on to. You know, even in my everyday life, you know, there's like, this is super exciting, like, you know, the prize and all of this, but like this conversation that we're having is so much more meaningful. It says so much.
Yeah, great. And Young, you touched on your thoughts about your own evolution as an artist with your work. And so for you, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the fact that there are 3 different figures. You talked about your experience, but there's probably more than 3 in total. There are quite a few figures, 3 very prominent figures, but could you talk a little bit about that and your personal experience as it relates to the multiplicity of your composition, I suppose?
Oh, yeah. So the painting is all about like myself, like my internal discourse. And so I tried to describe it like sometimes very directly and sometimes a little bit metaphorically. And then like, so there is a like multiple figures, like it's all me, but in the center, like having moments like, oh, I have an idea for my painting, but feel like I cannot paint at all, something like a situation. And then like upper side, like another me having like insomnia every night because I have too much thoughts in my head. Also like in the bottom, me trying to like solve problems by doing, trying everything like reading and thinking or writing, but seems like nothing working. They kind of like things are what I was like actually having that time. So it's very direct kind of a depiction of the situation, I think. And then like in my painting, there is a many like eyes, like they're looking at me, or like eye shapes. Like in my painting, the light above my head, there is like a light, but I made it kind of like eyeball shape. So to like present like people that expecting something great works from me. It can be like your professors or colleagues or like art critic. Maybe they are just supporting you, but when you are like vulnerable moments, you feel like pressure from any expectation. So yeah, that's kind of like.
Great. Yes, the eyes are so prominent. And by the way, for both of you, I keep looking at your images. I'm not looking away or distracted. I'm literally looking at them as we talk, because it's fun to have you available while I look straight at them. What about process, Young, in terms of how you work, your own process and your technique? Could you describe that just a little bit?
When I work, I don't use any photo reference. So I think my imagination to the very crucial role for my work. And then I always carry around like a little notepad, and whenever I have some ideas or like stories, I just try to write it down right away along with the little thumbnail sketches. And then these thumbnail sketches like usually become bigger scale, like compositional study. Like usually I won't start the painting until I have like well developed composition. But once I like start actual painting, I try to work more like intuitively using like various brush strokes and mark making to express myself and make my painting more interesting. Yeah.
So you create a very defined framework, and then you have you give yourself a little more permission to work loosely to fill in that structure.
That's right.
Makes sense. Okay. Michon, how about you?
First of all, Young, I admire that. That's awesome. I wish I could let go like that. That's so great. I totally use photos. I love photos. I grew up in a time where you could, you take pictures and then you take the film out and then you go and have them developed. So I'm super fortunate to have like this really just huge archive of family memories that I can go through. And most of them were taken by my dad with his old Minolta camera. So there's like wonky angles and, things that
Bad lighting.
I can photograph this. But I love going through those pictures and sort of piecing together scenes and memories that, while most of them did exist, I like to sort of make new ones. So that's kind of what I'm working on now, is like collaging, figures from different photos and putting them together, and just kind of recreating or making an alternative scene to what actually happened, and creating a moment in between that, maybe I wasn't there for, but I feel like I could still participate in it. And then thinking about, I just go straight to the canvas. I sometimes will project my drawing onto the canvas first, or I will, just go straight in with paint and just, see where things land. But once I put the underpainting down, it is just go, go, go. It's putting the colors down and, figuring out how true do I want to stay to the photo? How true do I want, do the colors have to be the exact same? Can I put somebody in pink where they were in blue before? So a lot of it is just problem solving on the fly, and it's really organic, and, it's a really fun process for me right now.
Wonderful. Thank you. And what about each of your experiences in terms of participating in the Art Prize? Could I ask you, Michon, first, sort of how you heard about it, how you decided you wanted to participate, and what your thinking about it has been leading up to this point?
Well, I hadn't heard of it. I had about 4 professors within like 3 days say, you need to apply for this. You should do this. You should do this. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I did a little reading on it, and I looked at the past, winners, and I was like, wow, this is a really great conversation to try to be a part of. And so from there, I was like, yeah, let's do this.
Amazing.
And the experience of being selected as a finalist I wasn't quite prepared for that. And then they were like, send a headshot. And my last headshot is from like 5 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, I don't look like that anymore. But I probably won't win, so it's okay. They won't use it. And
not so much.
Yeah, I know, right? And I was like, well, at least I was thinner, and it's a great photo.
Well, it's a very good problem to have, isn't it?
I know, right? But yeah, it's just been sort of a whirlwind, once I found out that I was a finalist, and then really looking at all of the rest of the work, I was really humbled to have my work in conversation with these artists, and these, we're all figurative artists, and our work is all so different, but I believe that we're all tied together, in some way, and I'm really grateful to be a part of it. It's been a great experience.
Young, how about you? How's your experience been? And more importantly, sort of what prompted you, what encouraged you to enter in the first place?
I haven't seen like many artists that submitted to this prize, like from our school. Like I'm from New York Academy of Art, and I saw that many people got into the finalist. So I didn't without doubt, I just applied it. So and also I didn't expect any getting into a finalist at first attempt, but I was very excited to see so many different ideas and approaches coming from all around the nation. So it's learning how other young artists deal with the figurative art. It was very refreshing for me, and I also having my work to be judged by art critics from famous museums and like renowned artist is like very rare opportunity, I think, for especially for the young artists. So yeah, I think it's yeah. I just overall it was like more than a great experience, like meeting like all different kind of young artists and getting an exposure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
knowing that all those different sets of eyes were on our work was just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about applying to some of the grad schools that these people are at, and I'm like, oh my, you've already seen my work. Wow.
Exactly. It's wonderful. And between AXA and the Academy, we work together on putting all of this on every year. But we've both got pretty well established PR machines, so that will only help you. And that's something we just sort of do in our sleep these days as organizations. So all of that's behind you both now, which is fantastic, and hopefully will continue to increase exposure. So hopefully the grad school process will be a slam dunk by the time you get through it. Is there anything you would suggest to other students? Young, I loved your comment that effectively you didn't think too much about it. You didn't worry too much about it. You just entered and got on with it. And it sounds like Michon, in a way, with the multiple encouragement you received, that it was just off you go and we'll see what happens. But any encouragement for other students thinking about entering or wondering if they should in future?
Do it.
Yeah, just do it.
What do you have to lose? I mean, the hardest part of it is like, if you're like me, I'm on the West Coast, so I had to like ship my work all the way to New York, but that was like the biggest challenge, and it wasn't even really a challenge.
Yeah, I just wanted to say like the same thing with Michon, like just do it. It's just, yeah, great experience. Even if you don't get the finalist or like prize, you still get to see all the different ideas and approaches. So I think it's great experience.
Good. And I tend to agree, because of course the same curators will have selected all these other finalists, and that's something, however you want to write it down or post it or share it with the world. These curators picked every finalist in the show, and that's worth something even without the formal prize at the end. It's a prize of a different sort.
Yeah, you've got eyes on your work that weren't otherwise going to be on your work. Like there's no, like I said, there's no losing. There really isn't. So apply.
Exactly. Off you go. Yeah. So we touched on this just a tiny bit, Michon, earlier when you were talking about using photographs, collaging, and thinking about piecing things together and making decisions. But are there other areas that you're exploring, or kind of where do you go from here, and where are you with your work at the moment in terms of goals and aspirations right now? It's been a wild year on a lot of levels.
That is the understatement of the year. I am still just kind of plugging away. I'm going along my sort of same path. I really like my process. I love going through these photos. I love rehashing these memories and recreating them in different ways. I actually do work in other mediums too. I'm doing some sort of combination textile work and painting work, like making paintings and then adding textile aspects to them and vice versa. I work in glass as well. So I'll be, once the world opens back up again and I have access to glass studios, I'll be making, more etchings and whatnot. I've got my senior show coming up, which is huge, graduating and graduate school and so many things. Yeah.
Do you think you'll go straight to grad school? Are you hoping to carry right through?
If they'll have me, absolutely.
Excellent. Good. I'm sure they will. I assume you'll have some choices. At least I hope so.
I hope so, yeah.
Amazing. And Young, how about you? What's next, or what's on your mind these days, knowing how unusual it is? But for your work, where are you headed at the moment?
So I'm graduated this year, so I'm just taking more time in my studio. And I kind of changed my subject matter after the pandemic started. Like, I think experiencing this like big global crisis, like made me to be more conscious about the outside world than like examining myself. So my current work like investigates like relationship between humans and animals or environment, like questioning how we humans have exploited and endangered like animals or their natural habitats for our benefits. So, but as always, I try to make my paintings like playful and humorous and bright visually to make like that contrasting effect. So yeah, that's what I'm now focusing in. And also I'm combining like sculptural material with my paintings. Like I'm doing many experiments. I'm doing many experiments too. So yeah, I hope it came out like something fun to see.
And an amazing experience. It's interesting. You're both talking a little bit about different materials or mixed media. And I always feel like whatever the outcome is, the process of experimenting is hugely beneficial. Michon, I'll be excited to see anything textile oriented. I'm a textile junkie for no reason. I just always have been. But I imagine that will lend itself really nicely to your work, especially some of the solid colored backgrounds or the clothing that just seems right for a marriage between the two. So that will be fun. I look forward to seeing the work in future.
Right on, thank you.
And Young, how great. It's nice to be able to say you're doing something constructive with this terrible COVID year, new reflections, new insights for yourself and for your work. What better outcome could you get? At least you're making the most of what isn't a great situation, but you have to find the bright side. So that's great too. I look forward to it. Well, super. I won't keep you any longer, but thank you so much. It's really genuinely so lovely to hear about process stories and your personal perspectives on it all. But I really appreciate your taking the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Good luck in the future. I'll be watching for your work.